I've watched a lot of entitled people walk through courtroom doors, but nothing prepared me for the morning Alexandra Whitmore strolled in wearing a dress that cost more than most people make in 6 months. She wasn't just confident, she was smug in a way that made my jaw tighten before she even opened her mouth. And when she did speak, what came out was so disrespectful, so dripping with contempt, that I knew this case was about to become legendary. What happened in the next 40 minutes changed her life forever and proved that in my courtroom, your bank account means absolutely nothing. The file in front of me was straightforward enough. Alexandra Whitmore, 24 years old, charged with reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. She'd rear-ended a minivan at a red light, caused significant damage, and when the other driver got out to exchange information, Alexandra had laughed, called her car a piece of junk anyway, and driven off. The whole thing was captured on traffic cameras, open and shut. But here's what made it interesting. Alexandra's father was Richard Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Technologies, worth an estimated $2.3 billion. The family had donated millions to local charities, sat on hospital boards, and their name was on half the buildings downtown. And Alexandra clearly believed that meant something in here. She arrived 20 minutes late, not fashionably late, disrespectfully late. Her attorney, some expensive suit from a downtown firm, rushed in apologizing profusely. Alexandra sauntered behind him like she was walking into a spa, not a courtroom. Her heels clicked on the tile floor with a rhythm that screamed, "Look at me," designer purse, sunglasses she didn't bother removing, and that dress, silk, probably custom, in a shade of cream that would show every speck of dirt. This wasn't court attire. This was a power move. I waited until she reached her table before speaking. "Ms. Whitmore, thank you for joining us. I trust there was a good reason for your tardiness." She finally removed her sunglasses, folding them with deliberate slowness. "Traffic was terrible. You know how it is." No apology. "No, Your Honor, just a casual dismissal like I'd asked her about the weather." Her attorney jumped in quickly. "Your Honor, we sincerely apologize for the delay. It won't happen again." I nodded at him, then fixed my eyes back on Alexandra. "Ms. Whitmore, this is a courtroom, not a social gathering. When you're scheduled to appear before me at 9 a.m., I expect you here at 9 a.m. Do we understand each other?" She shrugged, actually shrugged. "Sure." The gallery behind her was full. Courtroom regulars who follow my cases, a few reporters who'd caught wind of the Whitmore name, and sitting in the third row was Maria Chen, the woman whose minivan Alexandra had destroyed. Maria was a hospice nurse, worked 12-hour shifts caring for dying patients, and she'd been driving her 2 kids to school when Alexandra hit her. She sat there in her scrubs, having come straight from a night shift, watching this entitled girl treat the legal system like an inconvenience. I reviewed the file again, making Alexandra wait. Strategic silence works wonders on people who think they're in control. When I looked up, she was checking her phone under the table. "Ms. Whitmore, put the phone away." She glanced up, startled that I'd noticed. "I'm just checking something important." "Nothing is more important than these proceedings. Phone away, now." She sighed dramatically like I'd asked her to donate a kidney and dropped it into her purse. Her attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if we could proceed, my client has another commitment this afternoon." Another commitment, as if this were just an item on her calendar between a hair appointment and lunch. I leaned forward. "Counselor, your client is facing serious charges: reckless driving, hit and run, obstruction of justice. These aren't parking tickets. So unless her other commitment is a medical emergency, she'll stay here until we're finished, however long that takes." Alexandra whispered something to her attorney. He shook his head quickly, trying to quiet her, but she ignored him. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this whole thing is kind of ridiculous. It was just a fender bender. My insurance will cover it." Just a fender bender. Maria Chen's minivan had been totaled. Her kids had been terrified. She'd missed 3 days of work dealing with the aftermath. But to Alexandra, it was just a fender bender. "Ms. Whitmore," I said, my voice dropping into that register that makes attorneys nervous, "let me make sure I understand your position. You struck another vehicle, caused significant damage, and instead of stopping to exchange information as required by law, you fled the scene. And you're calling this ridiculous? I mean, accidents happen. People are acting like I committed some major crime. The attorney beside her looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He'd probably briefed her extensively on courtroom decorum, on how to address a judge, on the importance of showing remorse. She'd clearly ignored every word. I pulled up the traffic camera footage on the courtroom monitor. Let's watch what happened, shall we? The video played. Crystal clear footage of Alexandra's BMW sitting at a red light, then lurching forward and slamming into Maria's minivan. You could see Maria get out, visibly shaken, checking on her kids in the back seat. Then Alexandra emerging from her car, looking at the damage and saying something. The audio wasn't perfect, but you could make out her words. Whatever, it's a piece of junk anyway. Then she got back in her BMW and drove around the minivan, running a red light in the process. The courtroom was silent as the video ended. I looked at Alexandra. Her expression hadn't changed. No shame, no recognition of wrongdoing, nothing. Ms. Whitmore, do you remember what you said to Ms. Chen that day? Not really. I was stressed. The video shows you called her vehicle a piece of junk. Alexandra's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Well, I mean, it kind of was. The gallery gasped. Even her attorney dropped his head into his hands. And that's when I knew exactly how this was going to end. I stood up from the bench. When I do that, everyone in the courtroom knows something significant is about to happen. I've been doing this long enough that certain gestures carry weight. Ms. Whitmore, I want you to think very carefully about what you just said. You stood here in my courtroom, watched footage of yourself fleeing an accident scene, and your response was to insult the victim's vehicle. Do I have that right? Alexandra shifted her weight. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I just meant that my car is nicer, so obviously the damage to hers would be less expensive to fix. The logic was so backwards, so completely detached from reality, that I had to pause. This wasn't just privilege. This was something deeper, more troubling. Your car is nicer, I repeated slowly. Therefore, the damage you caused matters less. Basically, yeah. Her attorney stood up quickly. Your Honor, may I have a moment with my client? Sit down, counselor. Your client is doing just fine speaking for herself. I turned back to Alexandra. Tell me about that day. Walk me through your thinking. She sighed, like I was asking her to explain quantum physics to a child. I was late for a meeting. The light turned yellow and I tried to stop, but I hit the gas instead of the brake. It was an accident. That's why they call them accidents. And when you saw that you'd hit another vehicle with children inside? I checked. They looked fine. Kids cry over everything. Maria Chen, sitting in the gallery, made a small sound. I glanced over. She was holding a tissue, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. Ms. Whitmore, those children were terrified. They had nightmares for weeks afterward. The youngest stopped wanting to ride in cars. Alexandra's response was immediate. That's not my fault. That's their mom being dramatic and making them scared. The courtroom erupted. People were shouting. The bailiff called for order. Even Alexandra's attorney looked stunned by what his client had just said. I waited for silence. Then I spoke, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You're blaming a mother for her children's fear after you crashed into them and fled? I'm just saying, kids take cues from their parents. If she'd stayed calm, they would have been fine. I've seen a lot of things in 4 decades on this bench. Criminals who showed remorse, defendants who took responsibility, people who made terrible mistakes but understood the gravity of what they'd done. Alexandra Whitmore wasn't any of those things. She was something I see more and more lately, someone so insulated by wealth and privilege that consequence had become a foreign concept. Let's talk about what happened after you left the scene, I said. According to the police report, you drove straight to your country club. You had lunch. You played 9 holes of golf. You didn't contact your insurance company until 3 days later when Ms. Chen tracked you down through your license plate. Is that accurate? I needed time to process what happened. You needed time to process, while Ms. Chen needed time to figure out how she'd get to work without a car, how she'd afford a rental, how she'd manage her kids' school schedule. Alexandra's jaw tightened. Again, that's what insurance is for. Your insurance, which you didn't contact for 3 days. I was busy. Doing what? I had things, events. My life doesn't stop because someone's car got dented. I looked down at the file in front of me. Alexandra's driving record was extensive. 3 speeding tickets in 2 years, a citation for running a red light, another for reckless driving that had been reduced through her attorney's negotiations, a pattern of behavior that screamed entitlement. Ms. Whitmore, this isn't your first traffic offense. Everyone speeds sometimes. Not everyone runs from accidents. I didn't run, I left. The semantic games were exhausting. I could see her attorney's face getting redder by the minute. He'd probably told her exactly what not to do, and she was doing all of it. You left an accident scene without providing information. That's called a hit and run. It's a crime. Alexandra's expression hardened. My dad's lawyer said this would get dismissed. And there it was, the real reason for her attitude. Someone had told her she'd walk away from this. Someone had convinced her that rules didn't apply to people like her. Your dad's lawyer isn't here. I am, and I decide what happens in this courtroom. But he said that with my record and my family standing in the community, I held up my hand. Stop right there. I don't care about your family's standing. I don't care who your father is, where you summer, or which country club you belong to. None of that matters here. Alexandra's confidence finally cracked. What do you mean it doesn't matter? I mean that in my courtroom, you're just another defendant who broke the law. Your last name doesn't grant you immunity. She looked at her attorney desperately. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He knew exactly where this was heading. I pulled out the sentencing guidelines. Ms. Whitmore, hit and run with property damage carries serious penalties. But when children are involved, when there's a pattern of reckless behavior, when there's zero remorse shown, those penalties increase significantly. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. And what I'm about to do is going to teach you something your parents clearly never did. Alexandra's face went pale. For the first time since walking into my courtroom, she looked genuinely afraid, and she should be. Before I deliver your sentence, I want you to hear something, I said, reaching for a folder my clerk had prepared. Ms. Chen provided a victim impact statement. I'm going to read it aloud. Alexandra shifted uncomfortably. Her attorney put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. I opened the folder and began reading. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm a single mother of 2 children, ages 7 and 9. On the morning of March 15th, my entire life changed because someone decided their time was more valuable than my safety. The courtroom went silent. I was stopped at a red light when Alexandra Whitmore's Range Rover slammed into my car. The impact threw me forward. My head hit the steering wheel. My daughter Emma, who was in the back seat, started screaming. My son Michael was crying, asking if we were going to die. I glanced up. Alexandra was staring at the table in front of her. I got out of my car, shaking, bleeding from a cut on my forehead. I walked toward Ms. Whitmore's vehicle to exchange information. She looked directly at me through her window. I saw her face. She saw mine. She saw my children in the back seat. Then she drove away. The weight of those words hung in the air. For 3 days, I didn't know who hit me. The police were investigating, but without a license plate, it was difficult. My car was totaled. I couldn't afford a rental. I missed 2 days of work because I had no way to get there. I lost wages I desperately needed. My children missed school because I couldn't drive them. I continued reading, my voice steady but firm. But worse than the financial burden was the fear. My children are now terrified to ride in cars. Emma has nightmares about the crash. Michael asks me every morning if we're going to have another accident. They've lost their sense of safety because someone couldn't be bothered to stop and take responsibility. Alexandra's hands were trembling now. I work as a nurse at County General Hospital. I spend my days caring for people, helping them heal, showing compassion when they're at their most vulnerable. The person who hit me showed me none of that. She looked at my children and drove away. What kind of person does that? I set down the statement and looked directly at Alexandra. That's what kind of person you were that day, Ms. Whitmore. Someone who looked at 2 terrified children and chose convenience over compassion. I didn't know they were scared, Alexandra whispered. You didn't stay long enough to find out, her attorney tried to interject. Your Honor, your client has expressed nothing but excuses and entitlement. Now she's going to hear what accountability sounds like. I straightened the papers in front of me. Alexandra Whitmore, I find you guilty of leaving the scene of an accident causing property damage and personal injury. Here's your sentence. The courtroom leaned forward collectively. You will serve 60 days in county jail. Not work release, not house arrest, actual jail time. Alexandra gasped. You can't, I can, and I am. Furthermore, your driver's license is suspended for 1 year. After that year, you'll need to retake both the written and driving tests to get it reinstated. Her face went white. You'll complete 200 hours of community service at County General Hospital, where Ms. Chen works. You'll see what it means to actually help people instead of running from them. But I have commitments, charity events. Those commitments just changed. You'll also pay full restitution to Ms. Chen for her vehicle, her medical expenses, her lost wages, and the therapy costs for her children. I wasn't finished. Additionally, you'll attend a victim impact panel where you'll hear from people whose lives were destroyed by hit-and-run drivers. Maybe their stories will teach you what your parents' money couldn't. Alexandra was crying now, but these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone realizing consequences were real. Your Honor, this is excessive, her attorney protested. My client has no criminal record. Your client has a pattern of reckless behavior and zero accountability. This sentence is designed to break that pattern. I looked at Alexandra one final time. You told me earlier that you're important, that you have things to do. Let me tell you what's actually important. What's important is a 7-year-old girl who can't sleep because she's afraid of cars. What's important is a 9-year-old boy who thinks every traffic light might end in violence. What's important is a mother who dedicates her life to healing others and got run down by someone who couldn't spare 5 minutes to do the right thing. The tears were flowing freely now, but I wasn't done teaching this lesson. You drove away because you thought you could, because no one ever told you no, because your whole life, money and status have insulated you from reality. Well, reality just caught up. I picked up my gavel. When you're sitting in that jail cell, I want you to think about Emma and Michael. Think about their nightmares. Think about their fear. Think about what you could have prevented if you just stayed and faced what you did. Alexandra was sobbing into her hands. Maybe, just maybe, you'll leave that cell as someone who finally understands that other people matter, that actions have consequences, that being wealthy doesn't make you special, it makes you responsible. The gavel came down. Take her into custody. As the bailiffs approached, Alexandra's composure completely shattered. She turned to her father, reaching out desperately. "Daddy, please, do something." James Whitmore stood slowly. For a moment, I thought he might try to intervene, but what he did next surprised everyone in that courtroom. "Alexandra," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "you did this to yourself." Then he sat back down. The bailiffs led her away, her designer heels clicking against the courthouse floor, each step taking her further from the privileged bubble she'd lived in her entire life. Her mother followed her with her eyes, but made no move to help. I turned to Mei Chen, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, her hands folded in her lap. "Ms. Chen, do you have anything you'd like to say?" She stood, and there was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself. "Your Honor, I don't take pleasure in seeing anyone suffer, but my children need to see that the world can be fair, that people who hurt others don't just get away with it because they have money." Her voice grew stronger. "Emma asked me last week if being rich means you don't have to follow rules. She's 7 years old and she's already learning that some people matter more than others. I couldn't answer her because I didn't know if she was right." May looked toward the door where Alexandra had disappeared. "Now I can tell her that everyone matters equally, that there are still people who believe in justice. Thank you, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted in applause. I didn't stop it immediately. Sometimes people need to see good triumph over arrogance. They need to witness accountability in action. When the room quieted, I addressed everyone present. "Let me be clear about something. This case wasn't about punishing wealth. It was about holding someone accountable regardless of wealth. There's a difference." I scanned the faces in the gallery. Rich, poor, middle class, it doesn't matter in my courtroom. What matters is taking responsibility for your actions. What matters is treating other human beings with basic decency and respect. James Whitmore stood again. "Your Honor, may I approach?" I nodded. He walked forward, and up close I could see he'd aged considerably. The weight of his daughter's choices was written across his face. "Your Honor, I want to apologize. Not for my daughter's actions, I can't control those, but for raising someone who thought she could behave this way." His voice cracked slightly. "My wife and I gave Alexandra everything. We thought we were helping her, but we created someone who believes the rules don't apply. That's on us." He pulled out a checkbook. I'd like to establish a fund for Ms. Chen's children, for their education, their therapy, whatever they need, not to reduce my daughter's sentence, not to buy anything, just because it's the right thing to do. Mei Chen stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, that's not necessary. Maybe not, he replied, but it's what I should do, what I should have taught my daughter to do. I watched this exchange with interest. Here was a father finally understanding that protecting your child from consequences doesn't help them, it destroys them. Mr. Whitmore, I said, I appreciate the gesture. Ms. Chen can decide whether to accept it, but I want you to understand something. The best thing you can do for your daughter now is let her serve this sentence. Let her feel what accountability means. He nodded slowly. I know, and I will. No lawyers pulling strings, no donations to reduce her time. She needs this. He turned to Mei. Ms. Chen, I'm sorry, truly sorry for what my daughter did to you and your children. You deserved better. Mei's eyes filled with tears, but she held his gaze. Thank you. That means more than you know. Over the following months, I received updates. Alexandra served her full 60 days. No special treatment, no early release. The jail staff reported that she struggled initially, demanding privileges she didn't have. But gradually, something shifted. Her community service at County General put her face-to-face with Mei Chen every week. At first, Alexandra avoided her. But Mei, with grace I still marvel at, began talking to her. Not lecturing, just talking, sharing stories about her patients, her children, her life. Slowly, Alexandra started listening. By the end of her 200 hours, something remarkable happened. Alexandra asked if she could continue volunteering. Not because it was required, because she wanted to. She wrote a letter to Emma and Michael, apologizing and taking full responsibility. Mei shared it with them when they were ready. James Whitmore did establish that fund. Emma and Michael's college educations are fully paid for. Their therapy continues, helping them process the trauma. 6 months after her sentencing, Alexandra returned to my courtroom. Not as a defendant, she wanted to thank me. Your Honor, she said, standing where she'd once stood in defiance. I hated you that day. I thought you were cruel and unfair. She paused. You saved my life. I was becoming someone terrible, someone empty. You stopped that. I looked at this young woman, transformed by accountability. I didn't save you, Alexandra. You saved yourself by finally accepting responsibility. That's all I ever wanted. She nodded. I'm enrolling in nursing school. I want to actually help people, not just write checks to feel important. That's what justice looks like, not revenge. Transformation. Mei Chen got her car fixed. Her kids are healing. Alexandra discovered purpose beyond privilege. And somewhere, a 7-year-old girl named Emma learned that the world can be fair, that people do face consequences. That justice, when properly served, protects everyone equally. That's why I sit on this bench, not to punish, to teach, to transform, to prove that accountability isn't cruelty. It's the greatest gift we can give. Sometimes the hardest lessons create the most profound changes. Alexandra Whitmore walked into my courtroom believing money could buy her way out of anything. She left understanding that character isn't purchased. It's built through facing what you've done. And Maria Chen's children learned something equally important, that justice still exists for everyone, regardless of who has the bigger bank account. That's what real accountability looks like. And that's why cases like this matter long after the gavel comes down.
Guys, now enjoy the game. Let's start the game. Enjoy.